News of Fairyqin's arrival in Yuzhou City spread like wildfire. It hit the Great Shang dynasty like an explosion. Everyone was talking about her, the plum blossom sword immortal. Why was she coming? To find a disciple, of course. For days, storytellers and nobles alike couldn't stop mentioning her name. Qin Yahello. She was beautiful, powerful, and unrivaled in this world. A goddess like her looking for a personal disciple? It was enough to drive anyone crazy. But becoming her pupil wasn't easy. You had to be a once-in-a-century genius. For 3 months, she had traveled through a dozen cities in the Shang dynasty and found no one who met her standards. Now, she was coming to Yuzhou for one person, a rumored peerless talent. In this world, 5 young geniuses stood above all others. There was Sanzang of the Buddhist sect, Yan Xiaoyu of the Divine Temple, Huiling'er of the Vermilion Bird sect, and Prince Mu Bai of our own Great Shang dynasty. Unfortunately, all 4 already had masters. Inside the largest tavern in Yuzhou, a storyteller waved his folding fan, spit flying as he spoke to a captivated crowd. "Wait, you said there were 5. A man at a nearby table interrupted. "That's only 4. Who's the 5th? The storyteller took a slow sip of tea. "Do you know who owns the largest merchant house in our dynasty?" "Everyone knows that," the man grumbled. "The Li family of Yuzhou. They're richer than the empire itself. What's that got to do with anything?" The storyteller smiled mysteriously. "Li Baiwan, the head of the Li family, has a son named Li Zai. He is a genius who doesn't lose to Sanzang or Yan Xiaoyu." "Stop bragging," a scholar at another table scoffed. "How can a merchant's son compare to the holy son of the temple?" The storyteller glared at him. "I'm not lying. Have you heard of the sword maniac? When he visited Yuzhou recently, Li Baiwan tried to get him to take his son as a student. The sword maniac took one look at Li Zai and refused. He said only one thing." He paused for dramatic effect. The crowd leaned in, breathless. They knew the sword maniac, a legendary master who lived for wine and the blade. "What did he say?" the man shouted, losing his patience. The storyteller smirked and took another sip of tea. He said, "The Li family's son is the child of a sword immortal. My humble sword is not fit to be his teacher." The tavern erupted. Outside the door, a young man in elegant silk robes stopped in his tracks. "Young master," his servant whispered, "these storytellers just want attention. The Li family are just businessmen. How could they produce a sword prodigy? When Fairyqin arrives, someone with your talent will surely be the one she chooses." The young man shook his head. He's not lying. The sword maniac really said those words. "That's why I'm here. I want to be Fairyqin's disciple, but I also want to see if this Li Zai is truly as brilliant as they say." Inside, the rumors continued to swell. Over the next few days, the stories about me, Li Zai, got wilder as they spread out from Yuzhou. "Did you hear? Li Zai was born holding a sword. I heard that when he was born, the sky turned purple and sword intent pierced the clouds." "That's nothing. I heard he created a peerless sword technique called Taiji when he was only 10. The heavens shook. I heard he leveled a whole mountain with one swing. That's why the plum blossom sword immortal is coming for him. I heard he's about to ascend to godhood any day now. One person tells a lie, 3 people make it a fact, and 5 people make it a legend. In 3 months, I had gone from a rich kid to a living god. I was famous. But at the center of all this noise, inside the massive Li estate, a place so big it felt more like a city than a house, I wasn't celebrating. People said the Li family's wealth surpassed the national treasury. For generations, we were just successful merchants, but in the last 10 years, things had changed. Perfume, glass, mirrors, soap, strange, revolutionary products had appeared in our shops, making us unimaginably rich. Only the inner circle of the Li family knew the truth. All of it came from me. Ever since I was born, I had been inventing things this world had never seen. I was born with a golden spoon in my mouth, but sitting in a pavilion in the middle of a lake, holding a fishing rod, I felt nothing but gloom. I looked like your typical pampered young master, silk clothes, gold thread, jade accessories. A total nouveau riche. But I was miserable. On the shore nearby, a scruffy, drunken old man looked at the fat middle-aged man standing next to him. A famous sword leaned against the old man's side. This was the sword maniac, also known as Old Zhang. He looked like a beggar and smelled like a brewery, but he was one of the strongest men alive. The fat man next to him was my father, Li Baiwan. Old Li. The sword maniac mumbled, his eyes blurry from drink. You promised me 10 jars of drunken flower wine. You better not back out. If I had a bit of noble elegance left in me, my father, Li Baiwan, had none. He was the definition of a nouveau riche. He wore silk from the south, rare jade from the north, and sat on exotic furs from the western regions. He even carried a string of black pearls from the eastern seas. His outfit alone was worth a fortune. If there had been any more room on his body, he probably would have draped himself in solid gold just to make sure everyone knew he was loaded. Old Zhang, my father asked the sword maniac with a hopeful grin. Do you think Qin Anu will believe the rumors spreading through the city? Old Zhang took a swig from his flask, looking indifferent. Don't ask me. You asked me to spread the word, and I did. Whether she believes it or not isn't my problem. My father sighed, looking at me sitting in the pavilion. His face was full of worry. Old Zhang, be honest. Does my son really have no talent for martial arts? None, Old Zhang replied instantly. He didn't even hesitate. I heard them from across the water. I turned back toward the shore and shouted, Old Zhang, you've lived a long time. Isn't there some legendary manual or a divine pill that can change my fate? Something to turn me into a martial arts genius. Old Zhang set down his flask. A manual? No, but I do have one method. Want to hear it? My father and I both perked up. What is it? We asked in unison. Dreaming, Old Zhang said flatly. I stared at him, speechless. The old man was ruthless. Don't look so miserable, kid, Old Zhang added, glancing at me. I can't help you, but that doesn't mean Qin Anu can't. Her realm is higher than mine, and she's seen more of the world. She might have a way, but first, you have to figure out how to get her to take you as a student. That makes sense, I muttered, nodding. She was a sword immortal, after all. She had to have some tricks up her sleeve that regular people didn't. My father looked guiltier than ever. I've failed as a father, he sighed. I have all this money, but I can't give you what you really want. I hopped into a small boat, standing at the bow while a beautiful maid rowed me to shore. With my robes fluttering in the wind, I looked like a character from a painting. Old Zhang just watched me and shook his head. He looked like he was starting to regret lying for 10 jars of wine. When the boat hit the shore, I stepped out and patted my father's shoulder. It's okay, Dad. He groaned, looking defeated. I'm useless. I can't give you anything but money. Money makes the world go round, I said, looking out over the lake with a brooding expression. It worked on Old Zhang, didn't it? When Old Qin gets here, we'll give her whatever she wants. If she refuses, we'll throw mountains of gold and silver at her until she changes her mind. 3 days later, the Plum Blossom Sword Immortal arrived. A massive surge of sword intent swept in from the east, stretching 30 yards across the sky. Suddenly, the air was filled with fluttering plum blossoms. A beautiful, otherworldly figure descended, standing atop a flying sword. It was a grand, theatrical entrance. The Sword Immortal is here, the people of Yuzhou City cried out, their faces full of awe. As the wind died down and the blossoms settled, Qin Anu landed and sheathed her ancient blade. She looked like a goddess who had accidentally wandered into the mortal world. Her white dress was spotless, her features perfect. She didn't look real. Goddess, I love you, I screamed from the middle of the crowd. You're my idol. I was bored, so I decided to play along with her dramatic entrance. I waved my arms wildly, shouting at the top of my lungs. But I was the only one. The surrounding citizens turned and looked at me like I was a complete idiot. Everyone collectively took a step back, leaving me standing in a wide, empty circle. I froze. Goddess, I low. The last word died in my throat. Why was no one else cheering? This is how you're supposed to greet a superstar, right? Isn't that Li Baiwan's son? Someone whispered. Is he a bit slow? I don't know, another replied. I never heard he was a fool before. You idiots don't know anything, a third person chimed in. Young Master Li is a genius. Geniuses are just different. It's called having a personality. I felt my face burning. This was a disaster. Without a word, I covered my face with my sleeve and bolted. As I ran, I didn't notice Qin Anu looking in my direction. Her eyes were thoughtful as she watched me flee. A fool, she murmured. Back at the estate, I found Old Zhang by the lake with his eyes closed. Did you see her? He asked without opening them. I saw her, I muttered, rubbing my nose. And, is she worthy of being your master? I stared at the scruffy old man for a long time. Old Zhang, are you mocking me? Yes, he said, nodding simply. You old drunk, I snapped, sitting down beside him. You sold your dignity for 10 jars of wine. You have no right to mock anyone. I paused, my voice softening. Is she really as good as you say? She looks so young. Martial arts isn't about age, old Zhang said calmly. You have to accept that some people are just born geniuses. Qin Nu is the best of the best. Must be nice, I sighed. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, he said. Don't be so obsessed with what you don't have. Then what's my strength? I asked. Old Zhang was silent. He stayed silent for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Finally, he spoke. You're decent looking. You've got the gold and jade on the outside part down. I gave him a dry smile. Your insults are getting sophisticated, old Zhang. Gold and jade on the outside. The next part of that saying is rotten wood on the inside, isn't it? Am I wrong? He countered. I heard another maid snuck into your room last night. Tell me, are you still a virgin? Get lost. I snapped. Being handsome isn't a crime. It's actually quite a burden. Old Zhang groaned at my arrogance. I've decided, I said, sitting up straight with a determined look. I'm going to make her my master. I'll walk the path of martial arts, become world famous, and eventually, I'll be invincible. Old Zhang opened one eye and looked at me. Are you serious? Dead serious. To be young, he sighed. Even your daydreaming sounds impressive. I ignored him. Just then, a servant came running toward us, looking frantic. Young master, the master is calling for you. What is it? I asked. The sword immortal. The plum blossom sword immortal has arrived. I jumped to my feet, my heart racing. Already. I didn't wait for another word. I sprinted toward the front courtyard. Behind me, I heard old Zhang chuckle. Kids. No patience at all. I rushed into the main hall and saw my father, Li Baiwan, acting like a total sycophant. He was hovering around Qin Yahello, the sword immortal, with a look of desperate worship on his face. For the sake of my future apprenticeship, he had clearly thrown his dignity out the window. Immortal, is this tea to your liking? He asked, leaning in. I have the finest cloud mist tea, or perhaps some wine. I have 10-year-old drunken flower brew, or 20-year-old daughter's red. He kept droning on. When I saw his pathetic display, I wanted to crawl into a hole and die. It was embarrassing. Immortal, I said, stepping forward with a blooming smile of my own. You must be exhausted from your journey. I've learned a bit of massage from the manners doctor. How about I help you relax? No need. Qin Annuo replied coldly. She wasn't buying what we were selling. I think you both know why I'm here. My conditions for taking a disciple are simple. Pass my tests, and I will teach you. What tests? I asked, instantly alert. My father pushed forward to listen, but I shoved his face away. Move. Your face is too big, you're blocking me. He laughed nervously and stepped back. 3 things, Qin Annuo said, looking at us like we were a pair of lunatics. Complete 3 tasks, and I will accept you. 3. I felt a sting of worry. This woman was going to be hard to fool. I won't make you do them all at once, she continued, standing up. I will give you time. Today, I'm here to give you the first test. You have 1 day to find or forge a sword. It must be unique, masterful, and unlike any other. Without another word or a single hint, she turned and walked out. A moment later, she was gone. My father and I stared at each other. Is she going easy on me? I asked, confused. Everyone knew my dad was rich. I could buy 10,000 swords if I wanted. She said it has to be unique and masterful. My father said, looking worried. I rolled my eyes. Dad, don't be so naive. A unique sword is an open-ended question. The answer is whatever she decides it is. I paused, a thought hitting me. By the way, did you slip her any silver when she arrived? My father slapped his thigh, his belly shaking. I was so busy serving tea, I completely forgot. Old Lee, how do you not forget to eat? I snapped. Find out where she's staying. Send someone with the money now. No need to look, a voice said from the doorway. A beautiful woman with a graceful figure walked in. It was Li Yue, my elder sister. She bowed to my father. I had people follow her the moment she entered the city. She's at the Well Inn. Sister Yue. I grinned. You're the best. Not like Dad. He's totally unreliable. Li Yue smiled. You have good taste, little brother. That Qin Annuo is beautiful and has a strong build. She looks like she'd be good at raising a family. Get the apprenticeship first, then win her heart. I coughed. That was a bit much, even for me. Let's stick to the plan. You said she's at the Inn? Yes. It's one of our properties. It's nothing special, except for one thing. It's incredibly expensive. Expensive is good, Li Yue added. It means she has refined tastes. I turned to my father. Hear that? Go prepare the gifts. Make them expensive. The more expensive, the better. We need her to feel our sincerity. My father hurried off to prepare. I turned back to my sister. You should be the one to deliver the gifts. I don't trust anyone else. She nodded. Your business is the most important thing in this household. At sunset, Li Yue arrived at the inn alone. She knocked, and Qin Annuo opened the door. I am Li Yue, Li Zai's sister, she said, getting straight to the point. What is it? Qin Annuo asked. Without a word, my sister laid out a bundle and opened 3 boxes. An Eastern Sea luminous pearl, found at the bottom of the ocean. Value, 100,000 gold. The heavenly silk soft armor. Impervious to blades, fire, and water. Value, 1 million gold. The fish gut sword. An ancient masterpiece. Priceless. 3 treasures of the world sat before the sword immortal. My sister didn't linger. As she reached the door, she asked one question. Does the immortal have any guidance for us? Qin Annuo was silent for a long time. Just do your best, she finally said. That night, I stood in the courtyard looking at the stars, feeling poetic. Money makes the world go round, I whispered, and even the devil works for a price. In the room nearby, my father watched me through the window with pride. My son is a genius, he whispered. The next day, the deadline arrived. Plum blossoms drifted through the air as Qin Annuo descended, looking like a goddess who didn't belong to the mortal world. She was perfect, cold, and pure. In the main hall, I pulled out a sword made of solid, pure gold. It was blindingly bright. I handed it to her. She looked at it for a long time, then nodded. Impressive, she said calmly. A true swordsman cares for the soul, not the blade. At the highest level, even a falling leaf can be a sword. To be too obsessed with the weapon is a mistake. Your answer is correct. You pass. My father and I shared a look. We both knew the truth. I wouldn't admit I bribed her, and she wouldn't admit she went easy on me because of the treasures. Before she left, she gave me the second test. Within 1 day, create your own sword style. I almost laughed. This was a freebie. The people of Yuzhou City already whispered that I created a style called Tai Chi when I was 10. She was clearly trying to help me pass. You've got this, son? My father asked excitedly. It's in the bag, I said, waving him off. I headed to the backyard to go fishing. Old Zhang was there, eyes closed as usual. Did you pass? He asked. I did, I said. He opened his eyes, shocked. With that piece of junk gold sword? Of course not, I smiled thinly. Yesterday, my sister sent her a luminous pearl, the silk armor, and the fish gut sword. My dad really paid the price this time. Old Zhang sat bolt upright. The fish gut sword? That was in your house. Where else would it be? I tossed a stone into the lake. If we didn't show her our best treasures, why would she let me slide? Old Zhang sighed, truly impressed. I give up. Money really can move mountains. Even a legendary figure like Qin Annuo can't resist a good bribe. She's only human, I said with a smirk. She isn't ordinary, so the price we paid wasn't ordinary either. So what's the second test? Old Zhang asked, leaning in with curiosity. I have to create my own sword style within a single day, I replied. Old Zhang went silent. If he had any doubts before, he was certain now. Qin Annuo was definitely throwing the match. I don't get it, he said, staring out at the shimmering lake. Qin Annuo has always guarded her reputation. Isn't she afraid of ruining her legacy by taking in a spoiled brat like you? Of course she's afraid, I said with a light laugh. Why else do you think she traveled through half the great Shang dynasty without picking a disciple? She's picky. Then why you? Old Zhang frowned. She wouldn't believe those rumors about you being a genius just because she heard them on the street. She believed them because I made sure she wanted to believe them, I said, a strange smile tugging at my lips. It's called psychological suggestion, Old Zhang. Why do you think so many emperors in history were fools? It wasn't because they couldn't tell right from wrong. It was the constant whispers from corrupt officials and the sweet talk from their favorite concubines. Eventually, even the smartest person starts doubting reality. I picked up another stone and skipped it across the water. The test she gave me today? That was influenced by the rumors too. Creating a sword style in a day is impossible even for a grandmaster. She's testing the legend. If I pull it off, she gets to claim the greatest genius in history as her student. Plus, I'm considerate with my gifts. To her, I'm the perfect package. Old Zhang sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he exhaled. Kid, I underestimated you. It's not just your family's money or your good looks. Your ability to read people is terrifying. Qin Anhua isn't just letting you slide. You're manipulating her into doing it. I laughed. Well, you didn't totally underestimate me. Most things in this world can be solved with silver. For the things that can't, I have this face. I stood up and puffed out my chest, letting the wind catch my hair. Look at me. I look the part, don't I? If I stand on the street and tell people I have zero talent for martial arts, who would believe me? Old Zhang didn't argue. With my sharp brows and starry eyes, I looked exactly like the peerless young masters from the legends. It was a perfect disguise. He took a swig of wine, looking almost amused. He wanted to see the look on the great sword fairy's face when she finally realized I couldn't cultivate a lick of internal energy. Anyway, old Zhang, I said, changing the subject. Have you thought about my offer? Join the Li household. Become our honored guest. He gave me a faint smile. Kid, the Li family has plenty of money and even better wine. But I'm a free spirit. Besides, you're just merchants. Your hired muscle can handle most thugs. Why waste money on an old man like me? That was the old Li family, I said, my voice turning cold. A tall tree attracts the wind. 10 years ago, we were just wealthy merchants. Nobody cared. But now, our wealth makes people nervous. Even the emperor in the capital is watching us. My latest intel says the third prince, Mu Yao, has already arrived in Yuzhou City. He's looking for a way to tear us down. Old Zhang's expression shifted. The royal family? That's bad news. Your father is getting old, and you, well, you act like a lazy playboy who doesn't care about the business. If something happens to your old man, your sister Li Yue is too kind-hearted to hold this empire together alone. Kind-hearted? I blinked, then a weird expression crossed my face. Yeah, that's one way to describe her. Inside the Li family study, my father, Li Baiwan, was looking over the ledgers my sister had brought him. He closed the books and smiled. You've done well, Yue. Your business talent has already surpassed mine. It's all because of Zai, she said softly. If he hadn't invented things like perfume, soap, and glass mirrors, we'd still just be ordinary traders. It's a pity the boy has no interest in the family business, my father sighed. He's been obsessed with the martial path since he was a child. If Zai wants the stars in the sky, I'll pluck them for him, she replied calmly. My father shook his head. You always spoil him. But tell me, do you know about Prince Mu Yao being in town? I know, she nodded. The emperor sent him to sniff out our secrets. He won't find a thing, my father said firmly. But there's more. Mu Yao is a swordsman. I suspect he also wants to apprentice under Qin Anhua. The calm in my sister's eyes vanished, replaced by a terrifying chill. I'll have him killed, she said, her voice flat. I'll make sure it's clean. No tracks left behind. My father winced. You always get so impulsive when it comes to Zai. He already knows about the prince. Since he hasn't asked us to step in, it means he's confident he can win. Just be careful. Don't let the prince find anything we want hidden. I understand, father, she said, her lethal aura vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. That night, under a bright moon, a handsome young man in silk robes knocked on the door of the Moonrise Inn. It was the third prince, Mu Yao. He carried a wooden box, which he opened to reveal an ancient blade that radiated a chilling frost. Goddess, this is my answer, Mu Yao said respectfully. Qin Anhua glanced at the sword, the famous cold light blade. The prince is indeed generous, she said. You passed the first test. Mu Yao kept his face composed, though he was relieved. He knew the first test was mostly a formality for someone of his status. He had given her a legendary sword to ensure he made a good impression for what came next. You know the second test, Qin Anhua said, her gaze steady. Meet me at the Li estate tomorrow before sunset. Mu Yao stiffened at the mention of the Li family, but he bowed and left without a word. Inside the room, the candlelight flickered. Qin Anhua stood by the window, looking out over the quiet city. Behind her, 2 wooden boxes sat on the table, one from a prince, and one from a genius merchant's son. The real game was about to begin. The wooden box held the cold light blade and the fishgut sword. Under the flickering candlelight, their steel radiated a bone-chilling frost. The night passed in silence, and when the sun finally rose, it struggled to break through the heavy clouds. Today was the day. The Li estate was preparing to welcome its most prestigious guest in history, Mu Yao, the 3rd prince of the great Shang dynasty. It was a massive honor. My father, Li Baiwan, met him in the front hall. He was grinning so hard his face looked like it might split, his large belly shaking with every laugh. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. Mu Yao, despite being royalty, acted the part of the perfect gentleman. He treated the richest man in the empire with calculated respect, returning every smile. They chatted for a long time, but I knew what he was really here for. Eventually, Mu Yao glanced toward the courtyard and smiled. "I wonder if your son is at home?" he asked smoothly. My father's smile widened. "My son is a bit of a brat. I was afraid his clumsiness might offend your highness, so I didn't let him come to the front. But since you've asked, I'll have someone fetch him immediately." He stood up and barked an order to his servant. "Go get the young master. Tell him the 3rd prince has summoned him." Back in the rear courtyard, I was sitting by the lake, lazily holding a fishing rod. When the servant delivered the news, my lips curled into a bright, satisfied grin. It was time to start the show. I walked into the front hall dressed in the finest Yunzhou silk, a piece of deep-sea jade hanging from my waist. My face was clear, my posture elegant. If you just looked at me, I looked like a celestial being who had drifted down to earth. I looked talented. I looked sophisticated. Honestly, I looked like a total badass. Even the 3rd prince couldn't hide the flicker of surprise in his eyes when he saw me. "So this is the famous Li Zai," Mu Yao said. He didn't even wait for me to speak before he stood up and approached me with a warm smile. The rumors in Yuzhou weren't exaggerating at all. "I am Li Zai. It is an honor to meet your highness," I said, acting completely flustered. I made a big show of straightening my sleeves and adjusting my robes, looking like I was about to drop to the floor for a full kowtow. "No need for such formalities," Mu Yao said, catching my arm before I could go down. He laughed. "This isn't the palace. This is your home." I straightened up immediately, smiling just as brightly as he was. I never actually intended to kneel, but the gesture worked. "I've heard of your reputation long before coming to Yuzhou," Mu Yao said as we sat down. "Seeing you today, I can see you truly are remarkable." "Your highness flatters me," I replied softly. "Your wisdom is known throughout the world. I've admired you from afar for a long time." We sounded so sincere, so respectful. In reality, we were both lying through our teeth. We were competitors for the same master, and every word was a calculated move. Mu Yao took a sip of tea. "I've heard your swordsmanship is extraordinary. Perhaps you could teach me a thing or two." "In front of your highness?" "I wouldn't dare say I know anything about the sword," I said with a humble smile. "Don't be too modest," Mu Yao countered. "Everyone knows you're a sword prodigy. They say you created your own style at 10 years old. Even the old sword maniac praised your talent." "Rumors," I laughed. "Just rumors. Unlike your highness, who is a true master. I'm just a flicker of a firefly compared to your bright moon." My father sat in the main seat, just nodding and laughing along, staying out of the crossfire. Mu Yao set his teacup down, his brow furrowing slightly. He was realizing that neither my father nor I were easy to push around. "Your highness," I said, taking a sip of tea. "I'm curious. How many divine palaces have you opened?" In this world, martial arts is about the body. There are 5 internal gates called divine palaces. If you open them all, you basically become a god who can move mountains. "The second," Mu Yao answered honestly. I let out a sigh of feigned envy. "The gap between us is truly vast." "And you?" he asked. "I haven't opened a single one," I said, grinning. Mu Yao looked stunned. "You're joking." "I wouldn't dare joke with a prince," I replied. "That's why I'm so desperate to become the student of the Plum Blossom Sword Immortal. I hope your highness can understand." Mu Yao's eyes narrowed for a split second before he laughed. That is for Lady Qin to decide, isn't it? Quite right, I said, putting my cup down. Regardless of the outcome, I hope you'll stay at the Li estate for a few days so we can show you some hospitality. He didn't refuse. He wanted to stay. The Li family had grown too fast and too rich over the last decade, and the imperial court was getting nervous. He was here to spy on us, to see if we had secrets they didn't know about. And he was definitely wondering if I was lying about my lack of cultivation. I watched him think, a small smile playing on my lips. The emperor was an old fox, and he was clearly ready to move against my family. Well, if he wanted to stay, I'd make sure we gave him a welcome he'd never forget. We sat there, sipping tea and smiling at each other, both of us hiding 100 different schemes. We waited until the sun began to sink in the west. Suddenly, the air grew cold. Plum blossoms began to drift down from the sky, swirling over the courtyard. She's here, I said. My father and Mu Yao stood up immediately. High above, a surge of sword intent filled the air. Qin Anhua descended from the sky, stepping on the air as if she were walking on solid ground. Her white robes fluttered, looking every bit the cold, powerful immortal. I looked at her entrance with pure, unhidden envy. Why did I want to learn martial arts? To fight? No. I wanted to look that cool. I wanted to be able to show off exactly like her. She landed in front of us. My father immediately went into loyal dog mode, bowing and scraping with a massive grin. Mu Yao was more composed, giving a respectful, royal salute. Old. I started, then caught myself. I almost called her Old Qin. I swallowed the words quickly and bowed. Immortal. My father broke into a cold sweat next to me, his legs shaking. Qin Anhua frowned slightly, clearly confused by our weird behavior, but she didn't ask. No need for small talk, she said coldly. Let's begin. Mu Yao and I looked at each other. After you, Brother Zai, he offered. No. Please, Your Highness, you first, I insisted. Very well. Mu Yao took a sword from his attendant. The moment his fingers gripped the hilt, his entire aura changed. He went from a gentle prince to a sharp, lethal blade. He moved like lightning. His sword was a blur of silver light, 10 strikes connecting in a single breath. Son, my father whispered, nudging my arm. How was that? Is he good? I have no idea, I whispered back. But it looked really expensive. Qin Anhua must have overheard us. His sword is like a startled swan, she said calmly. The third prince has the potential to become a sword immortal. My father and I exchanged a worried look. This wasn't good. Was she actually impressed by him? Did she have a thing for princes? But then, her tone shifted. The technique is excellent, she added. But unfortunately, almost every move is predictable. It wasn't self-created, Qin Anhua continued, her voice cool. Martial arts under heaven eventually lead to the same destination. It's not strange to see similarities. I believe the third prince put a lot of effort into these moves. Seeing her tone soften, I cleared my throat. I decided to play the bigger man, mostly to look good in front of her. The third prince's talent is truly impressive, I said, my voice dripping with fake sincerity. I'm honored to even compete with him. Qin Anhua glanced at me for a moment, then looked away. Perhaps, she nodded. Since you're speaking up for him, I'll consider this a pass for his round. Slap. My jaw twitched. I mentally slapped myself across the face. Asterisk, keep your big mouth shut, Li Zai. Why did you help him? Your turn, Qin Anhua said, a tiny, almost invisible curve touching the corner of her mouth. I pushed down the urge to kick my own ass and took a sword from my attendant. I stepped forward, the weight of the steel familiar yet heavy. As I moved into the center of the yard, Mu Yao walked past me, sheathing his blade. Our eyes met for a split second, a silent, electric spark of rivalry, but neither of us said a word. I took a deep breath. My expression turned serious. I gripped the hilt, felt the balance, and then I moved. In the back garden, by the lake, old Zhang lifted his head. He heard the faint whistle of a blade from the front yard and smiled. Tai Chi. To any master, it was the ultimate sword of a grandmaster. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he'd never believe a kid like me could pull off such world-shaking moves. Was it really my creation? He didn't believe it for a second. There was a secret here, but since I wasn't talking, he wasn't asking. Qin Anhua, the old man whispered to the wind. Don't let this brat fool you. Back in the front yard, My sword traced the circle of the Tao. It was a sword of no desire, no conflict, and total harmony. I moved through the forms, my footsteps shifting with the rhythm of the universe. Fast and slow blurred together. Mu Yao stood frozen. His jaw literally dropped. "How is this possible?" he muttered. "Tai Chi," Qin Anhua whispered. Her eyes were wide, filled with genuine shock. "Is this the legendary technique from the rumors?" As they watched, my movements accelerated. My defense became an impenetrable wall of steel. My strikes turned into flashes of lightning. Above me, the air began to hum. Thunder rumbled in a clear sky, and a faint, ethereal glow began to swirl around the yard. Qin Anhua looked up at the sky, her shock deepening. This was a heaven and earth validation. It was a phenomenon she hadn't seen in years. The last time it happened was when the master of the heavenly prison temple in the western regions reached a new realm, shaking the earth for 100 miles. While my display was smaller, the implication was terrifying. That master was a supreme cultivator. I was just a kid. To her, my talent was now officially off the charts. I finished the final form and sheathed the sword. The thunder faded. The glow vanished. Silence fell over the courtyard. "Did you really create this?" Qin Anhua asked, her voice slightly breathless. I gave her a mysterious smile. "An immortal taught me in a dream," I replied. It was half true, depending on how you looked at it. She nodded slowly. She didn't press for more. In this world, seeing an immortal usually meant a stroke of divine inspiration or a hidden inheritance. "Immortal, did he pass?" My father, Li Baiwan, asked, his eyes full of hope. "He passed," she confirmed. She looked at both Mu Yao and me. "Now, for the final test." I pricked up my ears. Mu Yao looked tense. "Tomorrow at midnight," she said calmly. "The two of you will duel. The winner will be my disciple." My heart sank. Mu Yao, however, let out a breath and a smirk spread across his face. He looked like he'd already won. "Wait, immortal." My father stepped forward, his voice low and urgent. "That's not fair to Zai." "Fair," Qin Anhua countered coldly. "There is no absolute fairness in this world. The winner is king, the loser is dust. That is the only fairness. Prepare yourselves." Night fell. The moon rose over the lake in our back garden. Old Zhang and I sat by the water, watching the moonlight ripple on the surface. "Old Zhang," I said, breaking the silence. "Is there really no other way?" "No," he grunted. "Mu Yao has already opened his second divine treasury. You haven't even opened your first. The gap is too wide." "My family has money," I whispered. "How much do you want?" "Divine weapons, enchanted armor, name your price." "Won't work," Old Zhang said flatly. "Unless." "Unless what?" "Unless you send someone to kill him tonight," he said calmly. I thought about it for a second. "Good point. Old Zhang, give me a price." He chuckled. "I'm an old man, but I'm not that sleazy." 100 jars of 100-flower wine, I countered. "He's a prince of the great Shang," he sneered. "Do you think I'm stupid?" 200. "Impossible." 500. I snapped. "I don't like killing people," he said, then paused. 1,000 jars. Plus 500 jars of the best Nurhan. "Deal," I said instantly. Old Zhang stood up and started walking away. "Old Zhang," I called out. He turned back. "What? Regretting it?" "No," I smiled. "Just don't kill him. We can't go to war with the imperial family yet. Just make sure he has to stay in bed for a few days." "Pathetic," he snorted, then vanished into the shadows. Late that night, at the moon coming in, Mu Yao was sitting by candlelight, polishing his sword. His attendant finished making the bed. "Your Highness, you should rest," the servant said. "I will. You go on." The servant hesitated. "Should we contact the local officials? I'm worried the Li family might try something dirty." Mu Yao laughed softly. "They're smart people. They know if anything happens to me here, the Li family is finished. They won't risk it." The servant left, satisfied. Mu Yao prepared to blow out the candle when a sudden, freezing wind swept through the room. The flame flickered wildly. His heart hammered against his ribs. Crack! The door burst open under an invisible pressure. A masked figure walked in. His pace was slow, but the killing intent radiating from him was suffocating. "Who are you?" Mu Yao screamed. "The man taking your life," the masked man replied. It was Old Zhang, his voice muffled and cold. "Help! Immortal, save me. Mu Yao roared, throwing himself backward toward the window. He knew Qin Anhua was staying in this same inn. It was his only hope. Old Zhang didn't hesitate. He blurred across the room, and his hand clamped onto Mu Yao's throat like a vice. Upstairs, Qin Anhua's eyes snapped open. A second later, she vanished from her room. I am the third prince. Mu Yao gasped, clawing at Zhang's hand. If you kill me, you're a dead man. Old Zhang didn't waste words. He buried a fist into the prince's chest. Thud! A massive surge of internal energy blasted through Mu Yao's ribs. The prince coughed up a spray of blood, his face turning pale. Suddenly, a sharp whistle of wind cut through the air behind them. A streak of sword chi sliced toward old Zhang's head. He let go of the prince and twisted midair, dodging the strike. Mu Yao slumped to the floor, gasping for air, as a lock of his hair floated down, severed by the passing blade. Qin Anhua stood in the doorway, her eyes locked onto the masked intruder. The pressure in the room became unbearable as two masters faced off. The Plum Blossom Sword Immortal, old Zhang said calmly. You live up to the name. Until next time. He kicked off the floor and dove out the window into the night. Qin Anhua frowned and immediately gave chase, her silhouette disappearing into the dark streets of Yuzhou. Two figures blurred across the night sky, moving so fast they were mere shadows against the moon. Within the span of a few breaths, they had already crossed several streets. Ahead of us, old Zhang leaped into the air, his feet tapping against the rooftops as he moved with impossible grace. Behind him, Qin Anhua followed, her eyes locked on his back. She didn't hesitate. She raised her hand, her fingers forming a sword sign, and a blast of sword chi tore through the air. Qin Anhua focused her mind and swung her arm. Her own energy surged forward, colliding with the strike and neutralizing it in a shower of sparks. She stopped on a roof, her eyes narrowing. She recognized that technique immediately. In all of Yuzhou City, only one person had that level of sword mastery. The sword madman, she said, her voice cold and steady. Old Zhang stood on the opposite roof and let out a dry laugh. He didn't seem bothered by being caught. Sharp eyes, he teased. I'm impressed. But tell me, how did the famous Plum Blossom Sword Immortal end up as a common bodyguard for the royals? Qin Anhua let out a cold sneer. She wasn't about to be outdone. And I never expected a world-renowned master like the sword madman to become a hired assassin. Who is your master? Is it Li Zai? Old Zhang smiled faintly. You think too much of that kid. I'm not some greedy sellout. The Li family is rich, sure, but they can't buy my freedom. Qin Anhua frowned. If it wasn't the Li family, who else would dare to move against the third prince? She stood there, calculating her next move. Qin Anhua, do you still want to fight? Old Zhang asked. Because if not, this old man is leaving. He didn't wait for an answer. He gave a hearty laugh, stepped off the roof, and vanished into the darkness. Qin Anhua stayed where she was, her eyes shimmering with thought. She didn't chase him. Their cultivation levels were nearly identical. Unless they fought to the death, she couldn't stop him. She wondered who could possibly command a man like that. Back at the Li mansion, I was waiting in the backyard. I paced back and forth until a shadow flickered over the wall. Old Zhang dropped down and pulled off his mask. Old Zhang, I said, rushing toward him. Did you do it? When have I ever failed? He grinned. That third prince won't be getting out of bed for at least 10 days. But kid, are you sure about this? Aren't you afraid of the imperial court's revenge? Of course I am, I said with a thin smile. But the court has already started suppressing my family. It's only a matter of time before they come for us anyway. Old Zhang squinted at me. I think I underestimated you. Even if I hadn't stepped in tonight, I bet someone else would have made a move on that prince. Who knows? I replied. Maybe the heavens just wanted to teach the royals a lesson. 1,000 jars of Zuehua wine, Zhang reminded me, holding up a finger, and 500 jars of newer home. Not a single jar less. No problem, I laughed. As long as you want a drink, I'll provide it. He waved me off and headed toward his room, complaining that hanging out with me made him feel like he was being plotted against. Once he was gone, I turned to go to my own room. I pushed the door open and saw a woman waiting for me. Sister Yue, what are you doing here? I asked. Li Yue sat by the flickering candlelight, her beautiful face looking soft and elegant. Waiting for you, she said. She pushed a wooden box across the table toward me. I opened it and found a long sword resting inside. What's this? A poison blade, she said calmly. The toxin is colorless and odorless. It only activates when it touches blood. It disrupts a person's internal energy for 15 minutes, then vanishes completely. No one can trace it. No one can cure it. I stared at the sword in shock. Where did this come from? Second brother sent it today, she answered. I felt a cold sweat break out. My second brother, well, sister, was a terrifying person. I hadn't heard from her in so long, I almost thought she was dead. Don't say that. Yue warned me. If she hears you, she won't be kind. Just stay on her good side. I laughed nervously. I know. Thank her for me, and thank you too, sister. The night passed quietly, and the next day, the Li mansion was buzzing. My father, Li Million, had invited every influential person in Yuzhou to witness the final result of the apprenticeship challenge. Everyone was waiting. The sun rose to its peak and then began to sink toward the west. Finally, Qin Anhua arrived. She descended from the sky, standing on a flying sword. She looked like a goddess, peerless and untouchable. The crowd went silent. All the main players were there, except for one. The third prince was missing. As time ticked by, the wealthy guests started to get annoyed. They whispered about the prince's arrogance, keeping an immortal waiting like this. But as the sun touched the horizon, Mu Yao still hadn't appeared. My father, my sister, and I all knew why. We stood there with straight faces, acting as confused as everyone else. Immortal, my father said, stepping forward with a polite smile. The prince hasn't arrived. What should we do? Qin Anhua looked at me. She knew the game was over. The time has passed, she announced. Li Zai wins. He has passed the test. I felt a surge of triumph. I gripped my fist tight. I had actually done it. Qin Anhua looked at me seriously. Are you willing to take me as your master? I stepped forward, a bright smile on my face. From this day forward, regardless of fortune or poverty or any other reason, I am willing to be your disciple. I will be loyal to you, master, and I will never leave your side until the end of my life. Master, are you willing? It was a strange, dramatic vow. Qin Anhua frowned slightly, but she didn't see any hidden trap in my words. In front of the entire city's elite, she nodded. I am willing. Beside us, my sister Yue smiled. It was a beautiful, satisfied look. I knew what she was thinking. Qin Anhua was officially part of the family now. But by the next morning, things got weird. Rumors were flying through the streets of Yuzhou. People were saying I had the talent of a sword immortal. They were saying the Plum Blossom Immortal wanted to become my Dao companion, basically my wife. I was in the backyard when a servant told me the news. I sprayed my tea right out of my mouth. I didn't tell them to say that. I shouted at old Zhang. He just gave me a look that said he didn't believe a word I said. Sure, kid. Whatever you say. I only told them to spread the news of the apprenticeship. I insisted. I have no idea where the rest came from. Master. A servant came running in, looking terrified. Qin Anhua is here. My heart skipped a beat. This was not part of the plan. I froze. Was she here to make me pay for those rumors? Before I could even catch my breath, a graceful figure appeared in the backyard. She moved with an eerie elegance, crossing the distance to the lakeside in the blink of an eye. Qin Anhua glanced at me, but didn't say a word. Instead, her eyes shifted to old Zhang, who was lounging nearby. So, you really are here, she said calmly. Old Zhang opened his eyes and gave her a faint smile. Fairyqin, it's been a while. Not that long, she replied coldly. We just saw each other 2 days ago. She stepped forward, her gaze sharpening. I'm curious. Why are you helping him? He has money, old Zhang said naturally. And money makes the world go round. He didn't stop there. Besides, didn't you accept his Yuchang sword and that sky silk armor? That's why you kept pulling your punches during the trial, isn't it? Qin Anhua went silent. She didn't deny it. After a long moment, she looked at him seriously. I chose him because I saw his potential in martial arts. Old Zhang's face twisted into a strange, mocking grin. Beside them, I started coughing uncontrollably. I had actually managed to choke on my own tea. Qin Anhua, old Zhang said, his voice dripping with mischief. Have you actually bothered to check his meridians yet? Qin Anhua's brow furrowed. Why would I need to? His physical build is exceptional, and his blood energy is vibrant. His hidden potential has to be beyond that of a normal person. That's exactly what I thought at first, old Zhang said, his smile turning wicked. Qin Anhua realized something was off. She moved instantly, reaching out and grabbing my arm before I could pull away. Slowly, the color drained from her face. Her expression shifted from confidence to pure shock. Old Zhang couldn't hold it in anymore. He burst out laughing. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. My secret was out. All 8 of my meridians were completely blocked. Not a single drop of true qi could ever flow through my body. I was a martial arts cripple,